Dead by Daylight basically doesn't have a tutorial, and even if the one they had was better, I don't think it would include the very important concepts, strategies, and techniques that I think makes DBD a great game. This video contains every single thing I wish I could shout at survivors when they lose or just give up thinking it's hopeless, and also things I wish more killers knew who feel the same way. Each section starts as though you know basically nothing, but very quickly transitions into more advanced advice so that both new and experienced players can learn something. This video took many painful months to make, so if you find it useful, consider sharing it so more players can see the depth that this game has. There are three kinds of hitboxes. The first one is the collision hitbox, and this is what stops you when you run into walls and other players in the game. The second is the survivor/zone. This is the hitbox that receives the hits from the killer's weapons. The last is the most important, and it's the killer's attack cone. It has two layers, a red layer that detects the actual hit, and the yellow layer, which is responsible for just directing the killer's swing so that it physically looks like they're hitting you when they swing. Now, if a killer looks straight up, their hitbox doesn't interact with the survivor/zone. This shows a simple concept. Killers can miss even when it looks like it should hit. Normally, this doesn't matter that much, unless the killer is using a power that they can't look up and down in. In those cases, crouching to lower your survivor/zone and or standing somewhere slightly lower than the killer can make it much harder, sometimes impossible, for the killer to hit you. This is called the crouch tech. Now don't worry, there is good news for killers. When killers lunge, they move at 1.5 times their current speed, which means if you swing at a survivor while looking straight up, you can move slightly faster than normal, and sometimes you can use that to get in front of them. A good example of this is beating a survivor to a window, a pallet, the exit gate handle, or the hatch so that they can't get it. Killers can also lunge to a drop so that they get there 1.5 times faster than they normally would, and they suffer the cooldown of swinging mid-air where it doesn't really matter. There's a bonus to this where it allows you to control your descent easier if you need to go a different direction than just straight off the edge. Killers can also swing to a corner in order to trigger chase sooner, which we'll talk about more later. A similar concept is true for hitting survivors through pallets. If the killer walks all the way up to a pallet and then short swings, their attack cone is in the pallet. If a survivor then drops the pallet, they vacuum their own hitbox back into where the killer swung, sometimes giving them a free hit. We can't finish hitboxes without talking about Huntress hatchets. Hatchets have a spherical hitbox. The far edge of that sphere might hit the far back edge of your hitbox, and it looks weird. But this does mean if killers aim at your head or your torso, they can miss even if it looks like it should hit you. This is a pretty annoying side effect of how simple DBD hitboxes are, because the moment you become injured, your survivor leans forward out of their hitbox. The hitbox is just not there. In DBD, you are aiming at and dodging your hitbox, not your body. What you think of when you think of sound is probably terror radius, but there are other very important sounds that players forget about. Things like grunts of pain, footsteps, breathing, ambient sounds like disturbing crows, or the little squeak a locker makes when you get into it. There's even killer-specific sounds like some killers breathe, snarl, growl. Players make a lot of sound that reveal their location, and you could be using this to better track them, and in some cases like Spirit or Onryo, there are moments when this is your only way to track them. Crouching makes you as quiet as possible, and being injured and running makes you as loud as possible. But even then, some survivors like Ada are incredibly quiet, while some survivors like Bill are so loud you probably shouldn't play them. All survivors are still pretty quiet just breathing, but as they run, they breathe heavier and heavier. And when you stop, it slowly transitions back to quiet, meaning you're still louder than normal. Something crucial to know against Spirit is after running for a few seconds and developing that loud breathing sound, you can release all of your keys and then repress just W to begin walking again, or crouching if you want to. And this simple act of releasing and repressing the keys will reset your breathing to default quiet breathing sound. We're going to talk more about killer specific counters later. You know terror radius gets louder the closer the killer gets, but did you know you can use that to track the killer without seeing them? For now, we'll ignore the actual heart beating sound and just focus on the terror radius music, which changes as the killer gets closer. It's important to know that obstacles like walls don't change terror radius. That means if you're working on like a gen, for example, you can listen to how fast the killer's terror radius is changing. If it's changing very quickly, that means they're probably coming straight towards you. But if it takes a while to get to each level and then maybe it goes back to a different level, you can literally hear that the killer is not coming straight towards you yet, and that you're fine to work on the gen depending on the killer. There's some killers where that's dangerous to do. This is a concept called heartbeat reading, and what most people mean when they say that is this example here. The killer is approaching me and I'm not currently in chase, which means I can hear his normal terror radius and not his chase music. I'm standing on this corner and watching two directions. This is commonly called check spotting. If the killer gets close enough that I hear his close terror radius sound, I will see him in one of these two locations. If I hear him close enough that I should be seeing him in one of these two spots and I don't, that means he's in my blind spot. This is incredibly useful and sometimes required to have a long chase in certain situations. Here's another example where I'm standing on the back of Shack. I'm watching to the right, but mostly I'm listening to see if the killer's going through the center. Since the terror radius increases, I run to the right because I know the killer is moving through Shack. Now, once you enter chase, the killer's terror radius is going to be replaced by the chase music. That makes it impossible to heartbeat read based on terror radius. But technically, you can still heartbeat read based on the speed of the actual heartbeat. It's very subtle and incredibly hard to hear, but the heartbeat does slowly get faster the closer the killer is to you. Some of the best survivors are currently doing this, but even they mess it up, so good luck. This isn't everything, and there are mind games in heartbeat reading, but that's all you need to know for now. One of the most common mistakes even experienced survivors can make is bad camera control. There are two main modes you should get used to while controlling your survivor. The first is flicking. Anytime you're running in a long straight line, you should be flicking forward and backwards to see where you're going and then check what the killer is doing. When you do this, you should not be looking completely straight backwards or completely straight forward. You only need to see what the killer is doing in the distance between you and them, and where you're going in the distance between you and that. It's also very important that when flicking between these two, you're moving your mouse quickly. Because you only have 8 directional keys, running in a straight line is very complicated unless you swing your mouse quickly. You can practice this by holding 2 directional keys and looking one of the directions. When you want to flick the opposite direction, move your middle finger to the opposite key. In the same motion, flick your screen to the direction you need to be looking and get used to flicking the perfect distance to run in a straight line while you do it. Congratulations, you're flicking and running in Dead by Daylight. Practice this until you can run in straight lines consistently. Even small mistakes will make you wiggle while you're running. The next mode is used anytime you're taking a corner tightly. This can be done on filler tiles where there's lots of corners all the time, or it can be done for just a moment on like the corner of Shack, for example. And you can still use your keys to make these turns. It's just, I'm teaching you something else. It's not everything though. This is where controller has a unique advantage in DBD because controller players can freely move their legs with their left thumbstick wherever they want to go, and they can freely move their camera whichever way they want that to go. Although they do have to balance between the two to make sure they're not wiggling or running in weird lines, but in general, they have more control in these situations. But one more thing, don't forget to tilt your camera slightly down. Nothing in DBD is in the sky. Everything is on the ground. You are literally raising your camera higher in the air to have a more downward angle on the environment. And congratulations, you now know how to feel, hear, and see in Dead by Daylight. One thing new survivors struggle with is getting fast vaults consistently. To get a fast vault, you need to be doing two things: running at full speed and approaching the window with at least a 45-degree angle. Some windows have obstacles around them that make this difficult. All you need to do is line yourself up against the wall, flick towards the window, and press vault when you get the running vault icon. You can do this by holding your directional keys down and flicking your screen as fast as possible, or you can hold your screen kind of still and flick with just your keys, or your thumbstick if you're using controller. Every window doesn't need this extreme of an approach. For example, this one you can do just kind of running straight, but this is a great window to practice on. If you do this correctly, you'll see the vault icon change to running vault, which leads me to my next tip. Practice pressing vault as late as possible. When you do this, you give yourself more time to reach full speed and achieve the angle in order to vault. Vaulting late has other benefits as well. It gives you time to see what the killer is going to do, and if you're holding an item, then it prevents the item from disappearing early, and this can tell the killer that you've locked into the vault. Once you vault a window 3 times during a chase, it gets blocked for 30 seconds. This only applies to you, and killers and other survivors can still use the window. After the window unblocks, a single vault will block it if you vault again within another 30 seconds. Both fast and slow vaults count towards blocking the window, but only if you're in a chase. A chase is only triggered if a survivor is in the field of view of the killer within 12 meters, but the survivor also has to be running and the killer has to be walking. Because of these requirements, on some tiles, you can run while hidden from the killer, walk for just a moment while they see you, run again when you're out of line of sight, and here's the crazy part, you can press the run key to vault in the killer's line of sight as long as it's very short. You also don't need to hold the run key when in a vault. So as soon as the vault is triggered, you immediately release the key again. And even though the killer sees you running, like physically you look like you're running, according to the game, you're not running because it's dependent on your key strokes. Shift teching can almost always be prevented if the killer just loops the tile properly, or by swinging to move 1.5 times faster and gaining line of sight sooner. Now that you understand how chases work, you need to know about a mechanic called Bloodlust. This is a mechanic that makes killers faster the longer they're in a chase. It adds 5% after 15 seconds, 10% after 25 seconds, and 15% after 35 seconds. That means once you're in chase for 15 seconds, the killer's gonna get faster. In 10 more seconds, they're gonna get faster. In 10 more seconds, they're gonna get even faster. Now there's a lot of ways to remove Bloodlust, and I'm gonna tell you the most popular attainable ones. Most of them boil down to just not letting the killer see you run for 8 seconds. This can be done by breaking line of sight and keep running for 8 total seconds, so the whole time the killer cannot see you again. You can walk literally in front of the killer for 8 seconds. You can do this by going around a pallet, for example. Like we said earlier, you can press the run key to vault back and forth for just a moment, and this will not count as running as well, which means you can vault a downed pallet in front of the killer for 8 seconds, walking once you get to the other side, and this counts as breaking Bloodlust. Or you can force the killer to do one of the following things: kicking a pallet, hitting a survivor, or using their power. There's also a little bit of a myth that pallet stuns remove 1 level of Bloodlust. The game removes 10 seconds of chase time from their Bloodlust timer. So as you can see here, if the killer is in Bloodlust 2, about to reach Bloodlust 3, yes, when you stun them, they will be sent to Bloodlust 1. But if the killer is already Bloodlust 3 for more than 10 seconds, stunning them will not drop them below Bloodlust Tier 3. And the only reason pallet stunning removes Bloodlust is because the killer is technically not moving during the stun, which means bringing perks like Enduring literally prevents losing Bloodlust because they're not staying still long enough. These details are important for understanding how fast the killer's moving. Now we'll talk about momentum. Anytime you have a survivor stuck and you're doubling back a lot, instead of turning 180 degrees and killing your momentum, you can gradually curve away from the loop and then walk directly into it and as soon as you make contact with the wall, turn as sharp as you need to. Doing this completely saves your movement speed. You don't slow down at all. This makes you incredibly strong at 50-50 vaults. Don't worry, there are plenty of tricks survivors do too. When running up to a window, if you release the run key at the same time you press the vault key, right at the edge of when you get the prompt, you will technically do a slide vault, but it results in this weird clunky patched animation that slows you down before speeding you up to give you the fast vault. Because of the speed ramping it does for your animation, it can bait killers into thinking you're within range to swing at, even though you're going to zip through the window. Survivors can also fake windows and pallets by running up to them and turning last second. When you do this on windows and pallets, you can make it more convincing by turning your survivor to look towards the window, since this is what it looks like when you actually lock into the animation. You can do the same for pallets, but unlike windows, you don't need a perfect running start in order to get a fast vault on a pallet. So you can also do things like pointing, crouching, just moving back and forth to make the killer think you're locking into a vault when actually you're just standing there like an idiot. Speaking of pallets, when you want to drop one on the side you're approaching it from, the game doesn't let you do it. The reason for this is simple. They don't want you to accidentally drop the pallet on the same side you're approaching it from if you're just spamming while you approach it. So in order to drop it on the same side, you need to tell the game you're going the opposite direction. There's 3 common ways to do this. The first is just releasing your run key. Pretty easy. The second is holding run still but turning the direction you're running in the opposite way. Similar to that, the third one is flicking your screen the opposite way to again tell the game you're running the opposite way. If you're on controller, you need to change the keybinds for dropping pallets and healing. I've said this in the past and people comment that it's not possible. It's read it, bro. While you're getting better, you might be trying to do fancy things to make the killer miss you, and that's fine. But the moment you get injured, you need to lock in so that you don't waste the speed boost you get when you become injured. There are other things to tell you, but this is enough for now. All right, look, you don't want me to give you a lesson about generators, okay? But every 5-gen chase you've ever seen was only possible because their team actually did generators. After the FNAF update, survivors always spawn together, so you need to spread out. Generators alone take 90 seconds. Adding a second survivor saves you 37 seconds. Adding a third only saves an additional 10 seconds. Already that doesn't sound that worth it, but guess what? If you add a 4th survivor, it only saves you 2 seconds. And it only saves you 2 seconds if you did the gen from 0 to complete together. If you only did half the gen with 4 survivors, you only save 1 second. Even if it's the last gen, the 4th survivor would be better off going to the door and waiting for the gen to pop and instantly starting the door. You should never stack 4, you should almost never stack 3, and you should only stack 2 on gens you desperately need to get rid of. At the start of the game, it doesn't matter that much which gen you work on as long as you work alone. If everybody spreads out, the killer can only chase one person. So ideally, the first chase happens while 3 separate gens are being worked on. The first chase is the most important chase in DBD. Going down quickly at the start of the game can almost guarantee the outcome to be bad for survivors. While the first survivor's in chase, 3 gens are being worked on. This is the fastest a match can go. But once that first down and hook happens, the killer can now start chasing a new survivor, somebody's on the hook, and somebody's going to the hook and probably healing them, which means now instead of 3 survivors doing gens, only 1 is doing gens. And it can get worse. Imagine if 2 of those survivors were stacking on a gen and the killer interrupts both of them. Now nobody's working on a gen, which we haven't even mentioned pain res, DMS, pop, or other slowdowns that are even better when survivors are stacking. The best advice I can give you is do not stack on gens, spread out as fast as you can, and take the first chase very seriously. Now we have to talk about 3 gens. This is when you complete all the gens with only 3 remaining in a small area. This makes it really easy for the killer to defend. So if you want to try to avoid 3 gens, you should work on the gens in the center of the map. Now there's not always 4 gens to do in the center. So what you should do is think about where the gens are positioned and then try to divide the map in half. This is called splitting gens. That way you can work on 1 gen on each side of the map relatively easily. But in many cases, 3-genning is just unavoidable. If that's the case, you need to find the 2 furthest generators from each other and push both of them at the same time. Avoid doing the gen in between because this is the easiest gen for the killer to contest. There are some exceptions, like if you're on a map with verticality or if the 1 gen on the edge is like really unsafe for some reason, but in general, this is the best strategy. When you're doing this, it is very important not to die in the 3-gen. If you allow the killer to get a hook in this area, they will camp you for free and push the gens at the exact same time. This is the survivor's mistake. This should not happen. If at all possible, you should not be working on the 3-gens injured. Work on them full health, and when the killer comes to interrupt, make sure you take a good hit and run as far away from the 3-gen as possible. If you can avoid getting hit, that's great too, but if you run into the corner of the map to avoid that, you're risking a lot. Sometimes it's best just to play boring in order to win. If your teammates are smart, they'll run away from the 3-gen as well, so it's best to just wait up and see if you can regroup to heal, at which point you can push the gens in another wave. You might have to do this for some time, but if you want to actually win, that's just what you have to do. Now, how do you find gens? Outdoor maps, it's really easy. Every gen has a light pole. If it's flickering, it needs to be done. If it's solid, it is done. Every main building has a generator. On RPD, any interior room that can spawn a gen has a light bulb on it. If it's flickering, that means the gen needs done. If it's solid, it means it's done or it didn't spawn at all. Either way, you don't need to go in there if it's solid. Hawkins doesn't always have a good way to find gens, but the portal room and the upstairs gen always spawn, and the hallway gens have these massive lights that will be flickering if they need done, or it's solid if it's already done. Larry's has a ton of signs everywhere, these colored yellow, blue, green flickering signs. If they're solid, the gen's done. If it's flickering, the gen needs done. And if it's not lit, what do you think that means? Exactly. On Gideon, you're looking for these sliding metal doors. Downstairs, the gen always spawns on the counterclockwise side, and upstairs, it's the opposite. It always spawns on the clockwise side. And if it's open, the gen's done. If it's closed, the gen needs done. And if it didn't spawn, right, there's no gen there, brother. Now on Midwich, if there's a way to know when there's a gen in a room on Midwich, I don't know it. In testing, I thought maybe it would be the lights, maybe it'd be wires, maybe it'd be whatever. It seems like the best thing that you have is these windows that you can kind of see into the room through, but obviously it's not that great. Among new players, one of the biggest problems for hooks is just going to save too early. When somebody's hooked, they can hang there for 70 seconds. During that time, they can't be moried, they can't be hooked again, they can't be used to farm perks like Pop or Devour Hope. The only downside of sitting on the hook is you can't do gens, and you can't save your team if the killer starts downing people quickly. But still, in most public games, the only time you need to get off gens to go for the on-hook early is when you see somebody else is being chased. When somebody else is being chased, they risk getting down and hooked as well, which means you're risking having 2 hooks at the same time, which is half your team. That would be bad. But until that chase is happening, you should just sit on gens and wait patiently for the killer to interrupt somebody. Of course, you shouldn't wait too long because then the killer can pressure the hook and prevent the save last second, and you don't want to accidentally let somebody die because of that. You should also consider who's the best to go get the save. The on-hooker might end up needing to protect that person, so you probably want somebody to go who's full health and who has the least amount of hooks already. Also consider how far away you are from the hook. Somebody else might be closer, so if you just wait a little while, sit on your gen and think about these things, you might notice somebody else gets off their gen and they're probably going to get the save as long as you don't see them getting chased. Waiting 30 or 40 seconds is fine before going to get the on-hook. That's basically half a gen. There is one massive exception to this. That's if you're facing a more sweaty, competitive, oppressive killer. The moment somebody goes down, another player needs to start stealthing for the on-hook. But they still wait to get the on-hook until somebody else is in chase. The only difference here is you need to be in position to pull the hook the moment the killer triggers chase on somebody else to give you the most chance of healing or leaving the hook before he can easily tunnel them. Sometimes the killer might meet you back at the hook and try to prevent you from getting the save. If you're alone, you might need to trade, which is when you run up, get hit, and then on hook during the hit cooldown. Just make sure you can get the save before they go second, because on hooking once they go second, especially going down to on hook when they go second, is really, really wasteful. You're better off just leaving them and going to heal with your team and regrouping. If you have more than one player, especially at the end of the game, this is really common, you should just all aggressively go for the on-hook, and whoever gets hit first just runs away. While the killer's on cooldown, another full health player can get the on-hook. They'll also get hit, but now everybody can make a run for it. There's also a concept called spreading hooks. If you played really well, or maybe you just hit a lot this game, you might not have been hooked that much. But if other players on your team are getting hooked, or some of them are dead on hook, you might want to try to force a chase to happen. And even if you get hooked, it's better than having a player die and then playing 3v1 instead. And remember when we said dying in the 3 gen is bad? Well, you can flip this and purposely take chase to where gens have been completed. This is called a good death spot, and we'll talk about it more later. Now, unfortunately for the timing of this video, a lot of things about hooks, tunneling, and camping are due to maybe be getting changed. The things I've already said should still apply. No matter how many penalties or rewards there are for fresh hooks, tunneling is probably still going to be somewhat of a strategy, and wasting time getting off gens early is still going to be wasteful. So hopefully this section is still valuable and I don't look like an idiot right now. Okay, I promise we'll talk about looping very soon, but first I want to go over some common scenarios you're going to find yourself in and what you should do about it. The first is 99ing exit gates. 99ing gates is almost never the play anymore because killers can punish you pretty easily for this. But that also doesn't technically mean you should open them immediately. Once the gate reaches 99, you should let go and think about a couple of things before you open. Number one, is somebody going down? If somebody's getting down, you want to avoid perks like Blood Warden, and you want to see where the hook is before you decide what to do. Number two, are your teammates injured and healing? You don't want to put your team on a timer and then go start healing and then go try to get the on hook. Instead, just wait. Maybe your team can get healed, maybe they can come to you and heal before you can open the gate and then go for the save. But wait, before you even open now, look to see if there's another gate closer to the hook that maybe you can watch and see if your teammates are starting to do, and just wait for them to fully 99 that gate and then open them both at the same time. Again, you're just waiting to start the timer as late as possible, but you're also not completely leaving the gate 99 because that would be a mistake. Next is finishing the last gen. Unless the killer's about to get pain res, just wait when you're about to finish the last gen and think about a couple things. One, is somebody hooked? They might have adrenaline, which is a perk that doesn't proc unless they're unhooked. Or are they getting anti-camp? Are they in the basement where anti-camp is really important to get them out of the basement? Anti-camp gets disabled at the end of the game, so they might need that. Is someone being chased? The killer might have Noed. Are they the Obsession? The killer might have Rancor. Are they injured? If they're injured, then Noed doesn't really matter, and they might have adrenaline. You could heal them. Next, we'll talk about when you're the last survivor alive. When the third survivor dies, hatch is going to spawn. At this point, you have two options. You can compete for the hatch, or you can wait at a door for the killer to kick the hatch, and then you can start the door. This is risky because if the killer thinks you're doing that, they can just stand on the hatch and literally force you to either do gens or find them at the hatch. But if you are able to start the door, you should know the red light doesn't turn on until the A on escape. So you can progress the bar just before this, wait for the killer to come check the gate, and you can finish the gate without the killer even thinking you were there. 3v1 is when a survivor gets killed off early and you're left with only 3 survivors to complete the trial with. Obviously, in any situation, you don't want to get hooked, but in 3v1s, it's okay to play a lot slower than normal. When you're doing a gen and you hear the terror radius coming, walk away, pre-run, stealth. Doing boring things in this situation is very important if you actually want to win. Eventually, someone is going to go down, and that's where the most important part happens. One person should be staying on the gens while the other one is stealthing for the on-hook. It's very important that the stealther is not found. If the person going for the save is found and they can't get the on-hook, then the entire game is going to come to a standstill, and it's going to be incredibly hard to recover unless you have some great chases. Maps are broken up into smaller segments called tiles. Each match you load into is going to have some randomization, but the type of tile that spawns in each place will be the same. That's confusing, so let's use examples. Main building will always spawn here. It might rotate different ways, but it will always spawn here. Shack will always spawn here. It might rotate, but it will always spawn in this exact spot on this exact map. Now, each realm has its own unique structures. For Macmillan Estate, that's the water tower and the logs. While Autohaven has a crane, fun bus, and truck, Coldon has meat tree and harvester, and Yamoka Estate has the arbor, the shrine, and the patio. Just to name a few, but the point is, when you load into a map and you see a unique tile that doesn't look like anything you've seen on other maps, it's probably this map's unique structure, and you should pay attention to if its spawn seems to change the next time you get that map. If you don't feel like doing that, I got this whole map on the screen idea from a Steam guide. This guy created every map with great visuals, better than I could make, and I'll link it in the description. On Groaning Storehouse, there's only one spawn for unique structures, so that would be here, and again, it doesn't change from this spot. I'm gonna stop repeating that. Each icon on this map, it can't move. It cannot move, brother. Next, we have maze tiles, which are some of the strongest tiles in the game. These are tall walled tiles that usually have more than one resource inside of them in order for you to make a loop to run around. After that, we fill in the rest of the map with tiles called filler tiles. These can sometimes be completely useless empty tiles with just garbage or rocks or trees, or sometimes it can also be a hill. Don't forget about the hills, but otherwise it's going to be rocks and garbage with a pallet on it in order for you to loop it. Sometimes, especially more these days, there are two pallets on a filler tile. There is one subcategory of filler tiles, which are pathway filler tiles. The reason this is a subcategory is because they kind of keep separated. Like a hill is never going to spawn where a path tile spawns. After that, we got edge map tiles, which is usually just garbage and debris, but sometimes you get a Z-wall with a window or a little tiny pallet to use just kind of as a last resort. But knowing how maps spawn isn't enough to make you great. Some people get caught up in the idea that being good means you can do anything with any amount of loops on the fly, you'll figure it out. And while there is some truth to that, even the best players need to scout the map to see what resources they have. Even if you want to load in and get right on a gen, which is fine, you should look around to see what resources you got in the immediate area and figure out where you're located on the map so you can make some assumptions about where certain tiles spawned. Now, the most common way people will teach you to loop is by showing you the generic path to take on every tile. And I'm gonna do that in just a minute, but first I want to teach you about stringing loops together. This is a very important skill which involves recognizing when part of one tile actually makes another one stronger. To show you what I'm talking about, let's use an example. Here I loaded into Suffocation Pit and we have a variant gym next to a T&L wall. This isn't mind-blowingly OP, but it's pretty strong. If the killer tried to play the T&L wall correctly, they would actually push me into the variant wall gym, which then forces them to go around it one way or the other, forcing me back into the TL wall. I can basically loop 3 windows instead of just 2. But this spawn also gave me a filler loop above the T&L wall, which you could also string into the T wall if you had enough distance. Each time the killer slows down to mind game or I vault a window, I have an opportunity to gain some distance back. But the killer is also building Bloodlust, so eventually you have to drop a pallet and force them to kick it in order to reset that. This is just one honestly mid example of stringing loops together. The shack has 2 doorways and a window. Against most normal, non-projectile, non-dashing killers, you want to loop shack by going in doorway 1 and vaulting the window from the inside. Then you'll turn left or right depending what the killer does. If the killer goes out doorway 1, you're going to go around the back of shack, resetting your vault on this window. When you do this, you should never enter doorway 2 from the outside unless you absolutely have to. But if the killer goes out doorway 2, then you can just go back around to doorway 1 and vault the window again. If the killer vaults the window, you actually have 2 options. If you want to try shift teching, you can go left and go back in through doorway 1. But if you're already in chase and don't really believe in your ability to shift tech, you want to eat up your distance between each vault. You don't want to just vault the shack window 3 times for no reason. You want to increase the time between each vault. So you want to go around the back of shack. Just keep in mind, smart killers are going to try to force you to vault the window at a bad time by walking in through doorway 1 a little bit and then walking back out as soon as they see you walk into the vault. You want to kind of wait to force the killer to enter the shack a little bit so that they don't get so much free distance on you. This skill is going to come up again and again in every loop that we talk about. But against projectile killers and some dashing killers, going in doorway 1 is bad. That's because from doorway 1 to the window is a long straight line where they have time to shoot you. Against these killers, it's better to stay outside the shack and just vault the window from the outside in. You can fast vault or medium vault, it doesn't really matter. This normally is pretty risky because killers can double back on you, but in this case, the distance from the corner to the window is much smaller, so they have less time to line up a shot. This concept is very important and will show itself again in many other loops. The short wall is very similar to shack, where you have this window that you want to vault from the inside. But because the walls are so short, you need to really incentivize the killer to enter the tile with you so that you can kind of zone them. You can do that by turning this corner a little bit extra to make them think you're not even interested in the window. Just like shack, the killer might go back and go outside, in which case you just go to the right, Or the killer might go inside, in which case you go to the left. There's two really important mind games to know about. First is when you vault this window and turn right, you need to watch to make sure the killer isn't cutting you off through the tile. But even then, once you leave this window, you can use things like heartbeat reading, watching for the red stain around the corner, or just listening for sounds that the killer makes to again check if they're coming through the center. Similarly, the killer might not follow you through the pallet when you're going to the window. They might bait like they're going to and then cut you off through the center, in which case you just go outside and around the edge of the loop. Watch your check spots, listen for your heartbeats, listen for your killer sounds. Be patient. You don't need to take distance all the time. Sometimes you give up a little bit of distance for free to make sure you're safe. The long wall gym is exactly like the short wall, except the placement of the resources changed. Again, you want to vault from the inside and then reset your window vault as safe as you can. The problem with this tile is if the killer is approaching from a parallel angle to the wall, then you're really unsafe. This bottom wall has basically nothing to double back around, and even though this top wall is pretty long, the distance to where the killer regains line of sight isn't. So this vault against a lot of killers isn't that safe. So on this tile, the biggest battle is just getting the killer to approach from a perpendicular angle. If you can get the killer to follow you through the pallet this way, now the wall is going to be extremely strong again when you vault it. But if you can't do that and you have to turn left, this vault can be a little unsafe. Instead, you could pretend like you're going to the pallet, and if they actually follow you past this wall, you can cut back to the window and take the vault again. Now the killer could easily cut you off, but this is where patience is really valuable in DBD. T&L walls are pretty simple. If the killer doesn't know what they're doing, you just vault the window from the inside, turn right, vault the window from the inside, turn right, and keep going. And you could also shift tech this, making it an infinite. But most killers aren't going to let you do that. They're going to go through the center and force you to play the unsafe vault. In this situation, it's very important to hold your check spot and be patient with your vaulting. If the killer commits, obviously you need to vault, and if they don't commit, you can turn to take the other window or leave the loop altogether. Because they can force you to play the 50-50, it's important to get trapped in this situation on the T wall instead of the L wall, since the 50-50 on this window is stronger than the L wall. Now, sometimes you're going to approach a T&L wall from a bad angle where no matter what you do, taking the vault is unsafe. There's a tiny trick you can do where you stay in the killer's line of sight and look like you're passing the window. Then obviously you come in to take the vault. It doesn't give you a ton of distance, but it might be just enough to reset the loop for you. 4 lanes are pretty weak if you don't get the killer behind you for the window vault. For the inside window 4 lane, you want to go through the pallet into the center of the loop and then take the window vault. Some killers are going to try to walk down the side, kind of like they're at the grocery store looking for their mom. So it's important you wait up for them to actually enter a lane with you before you go into the center and take your window vault. But in general, if the killer's kind of smart, you're going to end up relying on mind games like baiting windows or vaulting a little bit late so that they mess up and commit inside. And you can vault this window backwards. On maps like Macmillan, for example, the walls are very thin, so as long as you're pressing vault late, you should be able to fast vault. Some maps though, like Autohaven, there's an intentional dent in the wall that you have to use in order to get a fast vault, so you can only get it from one direction. The outside window 4 lane has the resources noticeably further apart. That and the way that this tile is built just makes it hard to connect the window to the pallet. But looping even just the pallet isn't that bad. For example, you could pre-drop this pallet and then the killer's not going to want to kick it. Why would you kick such a weak pallet? Well, the survivor can loop the long wall and take vaults on this pallet and get 2 or 3 rotations out of it before even getting hit. Obviously, looping something where you're guaranteeing a hit in the future isn't great, but if you're only looping this one tile like we're talking about right now, that's all you really have. You can vault this window from the inside, but most people will recommend you vault from the outside because then you have this guaranteed pallet coming up. Really, the greatest use for 4 lanes in general is just connecting them to other tiles. The trash pile gym is very similar to 4 lanes in the way the killer is going to walk along it like a grocery aisle. Because of that, we're really going to start drilling, resetting windows. Playing around the trash in the center of this loop is what allows you to make the window. So you run through the pallet, the killer goes around, you go back to the pallet, and you just repeat this dance around the pallet until one of 2 things happen. 1, the killer zones themselves too far towards the pallet and you take the window, or 2, they force you to drop the pallet and you end up doing 50-50s until you finally win one, in which case you can probably make the window. Once you vault the window, you might be tempted to instantly vault it again, and while this isn't a terrible idea, you don't want to vault with the killer on the parallel line of the window. You want to reset them so they're approaching from the pallet side. If the pallet's still up, that's great. You can run through the pallet and do the same thing you just did. If the pallet's down, it's a little more risky to head this way and maybe you should take the window vault, but you could play more 50s on the pallet and then win one, and go back to the window again. It sounds more confusing than it is. You're just going around these islands in the middle, and this is gonna keep repeating. There are always obstacles inside a loop that don't have a pallet or a window that you loop around in order to orient the killer a specific way. Once the pallet is dropped, there's a lot of check spot mind games that can be done on this part to wait and listen for the killer, but that is beyond my ability to teach you in this video. Pallet gyms are pretty simple. They're just like filler tiles, but you can't see over them, so they give you some opportunity to mind game. All you really have to do is loop around the large side, pausing a little bit to make sure the killer's not doubling back. But a lot of people neglect this short side. If you can get the killer to respect this pallet for even a millisecond, you could run around this short side for an extra little loop before you drop the pallet. Is it risky? Yeah, but if you have good response time and you're patient, you can juice a lot of extra time out of the short side of the loop. Okay, Labyrinth gyms are going to be annoying no matter what you do, but there's two versions. This one has an island in the middle where you can set yourself up for either a window vault or a pallet drop. The interesting thing with this loop is if the killer pushes you clockwise, you should really only take the window vault, because dropping the pallet at this angle is really good for the killer. But if they're afraid of you vaulting the window, they'll push you the other way. And this way it's better to drop the pallet because you have this long wall that the killer has to commit inside or go around pretty early. So counterclockwise is good for the pallet, clockwise is good for the window. So if the killer, you know, it makes this interesting mind game in the center, although most people sadly don't even know that it exists. So the second version actually gets rid of this island, and you're forced to use the window and the pallet kind of together. You can pretty much just loop the window island until the killer's really closing distance on you, and then you vault the window. Waiting for the killer to get very close is what makes this window stronger. If you vault even a little bit early, their double back potential is just to the moon. If you get scared or make a mistake, that's when you use the pallet, and you kind of want to use it when the killer's close to you because they can kind of go around it. But if they push you the correct way, then you're lined up for the window. But it's not really safe. You really want to get a stun or just play a little dance with the killer around this pallet. The locker gym is pretty simple. It has two different spawns for the pallet, and mostly all you're doing is setting up for an unsafe vault on the window. Because the killer knows it's unsafe, they're going to try to double back, so you could bait the window and then keep going, relying on reaching the pallet to make sure that you're safe. If you're really lucky, you can use these lower wall areas as a little mini loop to set yourself up for a really safe vault on the window, but most killers are going to cut you off and not really let you do that. With the double window gym, hopefully you're starting to see a pattern. You want to vault these windows from a perpendicular angle. Anytime you're coming from the side, you're risking an unsafe vault. Now go ahead and guess what I'm about to tell you. Oh, look at this little island wall that we can loop around to reset the direction the killer's approaching from. Now, is this window kind of small and kind of dangerous and kind of risky? Yes. But so is the vault that you would otherwise be attempting to do. If you're approaching from the left side and you're about to take this top window, if you have any amount of distance, just run to the island instead. And now if the killer follows you blindly, you can vault either window, or if they double back, then you reset yourself to vault the left window. If you're approaching from the right side, it's a little more complicated, because if you have a lot of distance, you don't want to vault the left window anyway. You just want to run around it, resetting yourself on this top window. But if you only have a little bit of distance, the killer can pretty easily go around this window and get a free hit on you. So again, you want to use the island method. Just go around the island, and if the killer follows you, you can vault either window pretty safely. But more likely, if they're smart, they're just going to cut you off and you're back where you started, having to vault the left window. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes there's not always an answer. Next, we have the variant gyms, which there are two different versions of, and you'll never guess what I'm going to tell you. All you have to do is get the killer to approach the window from an advantageous angle for you. How do you do that with this tile? Well, there's a Y wall and there's a C wall. The window will either spawn on the Y wall side, which is called the Y variant, or it'll spawn on the C wall side, where it's called the C wall variant. You can run around either wall in either variant. The goal is to rotate the wall so that you end up on the inside of the tile, though, so that the vault is like advantageous for you. And if the killer's smart, they're going to be trying to double back or cut you off, in which case you just swap to the other inside wall, or leave the tile, or do other creative things to just use that distance they just gave you to come back around and vault the window. It sounds more complicated than it is. There's one more trick to looping, and that's check spotting. On most tiles, there's very specific spots to stand and angles to put your camera in order to have the widest view on all the possible directions the killer can come from. There are a lot of spots to learn, but most share the same rules. You do them at corners and you usually hide your body. There are extra check spots like looking through windows or sometimes holes in the tile, but you really don't need to memorize every single one. Just get used to looking around corners and glancing through windows as you pass them. And most maps have their own versions of each tile. Like Autohaven, for example, is so short you can basically see right over it, and there are countless little holes to learn and find and know about. Like this hole on Crane, for example, is basically useless unless you get a ghost face or a pig or somebody that can crouch, in which case it becomes so necessary to use. Or realms like Coldwind or Withered Isle have cracks in the walls that you can literally see right through. It becomes super obvious when you have a dark fore wall and a bright back wall, or if the killer's cosmetics are super bright or something like that. But this changes the game for tracking killers and even survivors. So many times I've seen a survivor stop on a T&L wall on Withered Isle, and I pretend like I don't know, and then I catch them off guard. It's insane. Now, there are tons of unique tiles and new age tiles that would take forever to talk about, but the truth is you already just learned how to loop them. You already know about the angle of your approach and how it's unsafe at certain positions, and that you need to reset the direction you and the killer are approaching from, or, counter the survivor if you're playing killer, in order to change how strong the loop is. You already know about the battle of trying to get a killer to enter a doorway or trying to bait a survivor to vault early. You already know to look for the existence of check spots or cracks or holes or spots that you can see through the loop to get a little bit of an advantage. So you actually don't need me to teach you how to loop anymore. Just need to take a few minutes to look at a new tile when you find one and solve the problem yourself. Now, obviously, a lot of killer powers will change the way you loop. And originally, I was going to include the basic counters to every killer in this video, but that would more than double the video's length, and I just don't think it's necessary to put here. So I'm going to polish it up a little better, make it more watchable, and post it later. So until then, I'll leave you with some general advice to improve at anything, let alone DBD. First, watch anybody else play. Videos like this, or just people chilling and live streaming, it doesn't matter. Everybody has something to offer you. Next, record yourself, especially when you make a mistake, and check it to see what you could have done better. And last, 1v1 anybody. They don't have to be great. In a public match, you might spend 1 minute practicing getting chase and 10 minutes doing gens. You already know how to do gens. You can get 10 or 20 times the chase experience just 1v1ing your friend than you'll get playing public games all day. Now, I taught you a lot of things in this video, and you might feel pressure to do well the next time you play. But don't forget, DBD is a game, and even though you shouldn't go out of your way to make other people unhappy, you should still play the game in a way that makes you happy, even if it upsets others. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night, guys. 3, 2, 1, now. Okay. I fucked up.
Bro,
no,
you
it's
can't
fine.
miss.
No, I'm using that. My camera movement actually looks like I'm brand new. Like I'm telling you, I might have like a disease. I might have like a. Okay. Run it back. Jesus.
It's just this situation is so goofy, bro.
Yeah, the angle's weird. All right. I did not mean to do that. Let's just go from this way, bro. This direction makes no